Let's look at another clip.
So what do we look for? Circular shapes, 90-degree angles.
But those right there are all
Strange
typical
patterns
coral
and
colonies.
things that seem to be piled on top of one another.
One diver described it as if there had been a massive wreckage and all these parts were scattered everywhere with all twisted shapes, things that wouldn't grow in a natural way.
Some of them are just table coral, which the divers are very aware of and dismiss out of hand.
One particular coral growth caught my eye. On approaching it, I recognized the shape as being of similar dimensions to one of the chariot cabs that we had seen in the Cairo Museum. It was heavily encrusted with coral, but I actually thought I would try out the size of the shape by kneeling in its coralized form. The coral on the object was 10 to 12 inches. More intricate work would not have been there. There were parallel struts at the front of the coral growth.
They're not allowed to take up a single coral from the sea at this location. It's illegal to do that. But the divers did find what they believe were animal and human skeletal remains. Dr. Moeller and I took these samples to Dr. Ebba During, a Swedish forensic bone expert.
When we found this, we speculated over that it's rather similar to a human femur.
I think if you compare those two, there are certain likeness, of course. So I think you have the carpet here going into the hip bone. And this you have for muscular attachment here.
Similar to this one.
To this one here. But if you follow what we call the diaphysis, like this, you can see that they are very much alike, and it's sort of a little bent.
Yeah.
And that's very, very special for the human femur. So I think it's not a bad likeness.
Okay, so that was an interesting piece of evidence that was brought forward. Aaron, were you along when that femur, or what looks like an oxen femur, was? Tell us a little bit about what happened there.
I think we were diving quite deep. It would have been about 20, 25 meters. And it was 1999, I think. And anyway, it was late 90s. And there was a pile of these corals. And so when we went down to look at them, they did look a bit different to anything else I had seen. There are times when longer corals like that seem to have broken away and they're scattered around, like branches falling off a tree and they're just scattered around the base of the tree, for example. But this looked very different. So somebody did take one up from off the seabed and submit it to, I think Ron Wyatt was on that trip. So that's how I remember it. Then it was Leonard Muller that took it away and got it all tested.
Yeah, I was there when we took it to the Swedish bone doctor, and it was kind of interesting. It was very similar shape. So then the question would be, like with Dr. Carter, well, it could be that an animal, we don't know, there's been 3,000 years plus time period where some animal could have been swept into the sea or whatever. So it's not to say that the idea was it an oxen pulling carts or something from the Egyptians? That was one of the theories.
The thing is that if it's a biological remains like a bone, it will be rapidly consumed in water. I mean, like, for instance, when they found the Titanic, they found hundreds of pairs of shoes, left and right next to each other, all over the seabed. Well, because the leather was tanned, it didn't decay very quickly, but all the bodies are completely consumed. They're gone, disappeared. And even without, or things that eat, bones dissolve in seawater. So, I mean, when we find shipwrecks of pirate shipwrecks and things like that, we don't find bodies. We don't even find wood. The wood disintegrates. The only way we find any wood is if it's buried under the sediments. Anything exposed is completely consumed rapidly, especially in tropical waters. So I struggle a lot with the thought that that actually is a leg bone. If it is, it's recent. Maybe it did get encrusted by something, but I suspect that's just a coral colony of maybe an acroporid or something like that, maybe a parotid, something that grows about that big around and grows, and every once in a while it branches. But I don't know because I can't analyze it, I don't have it.
Yeah. Now, it'd be interesting because I was there. It actually is almost the identical shape of a leg bone of an oxen. So that
Yeah,
that
so I
part
saw
was,
that in the video. That was actually amazing.
yeah. Having these calls with all the different people from around the world, there's different bandwidths, and we're struggling to keep everybody on the line here, and people are freezing up. But let's just listen. We're going to play more clips, so that won't be such a problem. Let's play another clip right now, okay? What's going on here, Aaron?
I guess we're just entering the water. Sometimes we would dive off a boat, and sometimes we would just dive from the shore. So we would just, this looks very shallow, I guess. The deeper you go, the more coral seems to be. The shallower you are, the more scattered it is with more sand. So we're basically just looking for shapes. I think one of the most important things we did was dive with metal detector. That way you can pretty quickly scan as you go and pick up on any strong data, any strong metal readings, which made a bit of a difference to me at least. And if you find something that has an interesting shape and then you scan it for metal, then you see what pattern of metal it holds in that shape. That would, make a big difference to me.
Dr. Carter, does this area look normal, like a coral, like what you have seen in other places?
Yep. It's just years of little corals growing and dying and more corals growing and dying. It's just what happens. I've got questions about the metal too. I mean, iron rusts very quickly in water. I don't know how long bronze lasts, but I suspect bronze is something that would corrode away pretty quickly unless it's buried in the sediments and away from oxygen. Gold, though, gold will last, but how much gold was on an Egyptian chariot? That's a cool question.
Well, and to some divers, they've said this looks like an area where a lot of debris was scattered. But in other words, this doesn't look like normal coral growth. So to an average diver who's an Exodus explorer, they're seeing this as a possible place where the remains of the Pharaoh's army was or something. But what you're saying...
I'm not seeing anything that looks abnormal.
Yeah.
This is typical. All around the world, different places.
I know a metal detector was used to try to look for, Aaron, you were using the metal detector to try to find would call a pattern of evidence, right?
True. So if we did see, say, for example, a wheel shape, we would try to use the metal detector on it and see if it matched any kind of pattern, like, for example, metal carbon, with where the spokes would be, then there might be some metal reading coming out from there. I understand that the spokes would be made of wood and would be there, but just to see if there would be any kind of metal reading for something that might hold the spokes.
Guys that know more about the Egyptian chariots than I do, the spokes are made of wood, correct?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
And the rims are made of wood, right?
Yes.
I believe that they're covered in either gold or copper.
Ross Patterson, what did you say?
Yeah, just saying, yes, wooden spokes and wooden rim, but there are metal fittings on the wheels. And just a point we would have seen just earlier, there was obviously a bit of modern debris on the bottom, and we were sort of calibrating the metal detector on that, and we're getting just as strong readings within the coral. Like here, obviously you'd find the metal inside the tire, the metal ribbing they use, and it's getting good readings, and you get just as strong readings in some of the coral. Not all the coral, but some of the coral, you get very strong readings, which would indicate there's some metal object inside the coral. And this is very old coral too, by the way. So this would indicate some metal man-made object there, buried there long ago, perhaps thousands of years, and the coral has grown over it. So it's not recognisable anymore, but there's clearly metal debris in this coral.
I think the challenge is obviously it's against the law to take any coral up. So it's one of these questions that might not get an answer.
I think, Tim, this, to me, it's just the opportunity to do more research here. And I'm surprised how little has actually been done in a systematic and scientific way. With the use of side scanning sonar and things like that, we could map out that whole crossing to give us more of an idea as to where we should be looking at what's likely to be there. Because, like Rob said, the wadi's going to flush silt and sand and dirt into that area, and so a lot of stuff's going to be buried. But it would be really fascinating to me to do a systematic study of that whole area, and I think that's what's missing, because I'm looking for the answer.
We don't know if Pharaoh's army was halfway across when the waters closed, in which case they'd be in deep water, or if anyone were in the shallow water. But even then, this delta is probably at least doubled in size over the last 3,500 years. So, take the thickness of the delta, and if it's, 500 feet thick, then Pharaoh's army might be 300 feet down under sand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then there's the question of what's happening. This is a major shipping route. So what's happened in those years since then, with the ships going back and forward and, and the currents, trash, yeah. But to me, I'd love to get some modern technology on there and scan that whole thing, see where there's potential, maybe even for digging into the silt. And I know it's quite deep, and that would require certain technologies, but there's an opportunity there, I think, to answer these questions in a scientific fashion. That's what intrigues me.
Yeah.
What would be really productive would be like, say, a magnetometer survey of the whole area, not just this area, but north and south. And I believe that would indicate a concentration. If we're on the right track, there would be a concentration of unusual metal and a line across the Gulf in that area. That's what we want to look for.
Mm-hmm.